morning. Welcome to Morning Moments. Thank you for being with us today. Today, I have another local person. I've got a lot of local people in the Hampton Roads area. He is a music minister and a worship leader in Chesapeake, Virginia. I believe he lives around Virginia Beach area, and he is a worship leader, singer, songwriter, an ex-police officer. I hope he tells that story, and so much more. I've just been connected with Tim, and I'm so glad that God's given us this connection. Tim Maurer, welcome to Morning Moments.
Good morning, Andy, and thank you for this invitation. It is a real honor.
When he was setting up, how you doing, he came across, and I go, you got to be from New Jersey or New York, and sure enough, it was New York. So how you doing? It was great to hear that. Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself when I ask this question. What do you do, and why do you do it?
What do I do? First of all, I love to worship God, and that's been in my heart since I was a little boy. When the Lord would first meet me when I was 4 years old, I would have an encounter, and the Holy Spirit would come on me, and it was a spirit of prayer. And that would mark me for my life. And then after that, a terrible thing would happen. My father, he was a pastor of a church in New York City called the Brooklyn Gospel Tabernacle. And my mom and dad would actually divorce in 1970. And that would send my life into a tailspin, into much darkness, depression, extreme insecurity, anger, bitterness. And that would attach to me and to my heart for so many years. The one constant would be that the Lord was always there. And in 82, I would find myself back in New York City. A number of years prior to that, I had been longing to go back. I felt like there was something that I had lost back there, that I just needed to return, and I felt that impression. So in 82, I would return to New York. I would be reunited with my father, and it would be there in the 80s that I would recapture a little bit of what was lost with my dad back there in the late 60s. He was the preacher of Queens Tabernacle in Queens, and I would sing on occasion for worship. And but there was still this thing in me, still battling, still struggling. I would meet a lovely woman in 1984 who God would use in my life, just a precious angel sent into my life to kind of somewhat smooth out some of my edges. And it was helpful, yes. But again, issues that were not dealt with. During these early 80 years, 83, 84, 85, I had really no direction of where I was going, what I was doing, or what I was going to become. And so I was wrestling with what it was that I was supposed to do with my life. And at that time, one day, a buddy of mine said, Tim, why don't you consider taking the test to become a New York City police officer? And I was a little taken aback because I would not consider joining the NYPD in any shape or form. You know, the history of the NYPD, especially in the 70s, and the corruption that was occurring and all of that, it just didn't seem like something that I could find myself being able to attach myself to. Well, I thought it through, and God would see otherwise, and the door would open for me in July of 1986, when I would raise my right hand and I'd swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of New York State, and I would join the NYPD, and it would be one of the best things that would ever happen to me. I'm so thankful that I joined. I would have a tremendous 20 years. The people that surrounded me were were horrible, they were great, and everything in between. It ran the gamut. I got to experience so many wonderful things and so many tough things. But the 20-year career was I'm thankful for it. During that time, I would go through the 9/11 terrorist attack. And that would be a real mark of my career, and all of us who were members of the NYPD at that time would come through that. My wife had married Claire in 1985, precious, precious angel, a nurse, a home care nurse in Queens. Well, she would be diagnosed with cancer in December of 2001, and she would fight a 7-year fight, and ultimately succumb to that in 2008. My father had struggles in his life. He would succumb to AIDS in 2005. He really had some battles and some painful life experiences that really tugged on him and pulled him into areas of humanity that I don't talk about too much, but I have shared in the past here and there. My son, who was born in 1988, he would have some tremendous issues with his physical body. And so I'd see him go through some terrible pains of surgeries and metal rods being put in his back and having his brainstem bones opened up so that he could be able to move his neck and whatnot. And so between the 90s and the 2000s, there were some rough years, many painful experiences. But with that, I was in church. I was struggling. I was battling through all of these issues. My father, my mother, the divorce, dad, what he dealt with in his life. And still I would find myself in church, and I would be singing, and I would be one of the soloists in either the Christ Tabernacle Choir in Queens or the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir in Brooklyn. And but through all of that time, there was a wrestling in my life that had just persisted for it really truly decades. Well, I would after the passing of my father, of my wife, I would ultimately remarry once again, and that would not survive my wrestlings and dealings in my own heart and life. And so I really came to a crashing end in my 50s. In my early 50s, I would have that where most people spin out of control in their 20s and maybe 30s. Well, it happened to me in my 50s. And so I found myself outside the church. I was hanging out in places that an old man, 50 some odd years old, probably, but this crazy guy, here I was. I'm now divorced. I'm going to try to live this life in New York City of being a single man. And I was ready to go, and I was ready to party. But God had other plans. I would move out of my house, and I would take over an apartment in Astoria, Queens, several years ago. And now I'm living on my own for the first time ever, pretty much in my life. And while I was living there, and while I'm trying to live this crazy man's lifestyle in the city, I would meet a precious lady who would come into my life, and it would be the cause of my turnaround, really. And really, the Lord would use her to draw me back and to want to serve the Lord and to live my life in the righteousness and the holiness that He was calling me to. over this time, I was also working as a tour guide. And sometimes when I was out working as a tour guide in Manhattan, which I was having the thrill of my life at the time, it was as if I was standing next to myself and there was a life that I was not living. And so the Lord would most graciously and tenderly bring me and draw me back to Him in such a marvelous way. And there's so much in all of that that I've said, but ultimately, COVID would hit. I would be married to my wife, Seiko, and we would come down here to Virginia Beach. And the first time in my life that a great sense of peace has existed for me through it all. And now I am here. I am serving God. I am serving at Church of the Messiah in Chesapeake, Virginia, and leading worship. And I'll tell you what, it has been the most fulfilling time of my life. And I'm so grateful to the Lord Jesus Christ, who has done all of this.
Wow. There's so much more to the story. And one of the things with the short interviews, you can't get to a lot of it. But I would like to hear more about it. Maybe we'll have you come back and talk a little bit more about where you're at right now. But if you want to know more about his story, you want to know more about Tim, I'm going to put down below some contact information about him. Maybe you're in the area and you want to hear him sing either at church or some of the concerts he does or open mics and places that he's at. Get a hold of him. Get a hold of him and find out more about him. And I really would like to have him come back and continue some of his story about where God's helped him and been with him. Some of you are struggling and you go, that sounds like a story that I've had. God's got a plan, a hope, and a future for you too. And he wants you to come back to him. He wants you to know that no matter how angry you are, how upset you are, what you've done, he still is a father with open arms, willing to bring the prodigal son back. And he loves you that much. His love has never ceased for you. He doesn't love you any more, any less than he does right this second. He is a God of love. And if you need that loving God, please reach out to him. I would be glad to help you out. Tim would as well. If you want to look at that information down below and want to know how you could make this next step to follow him. As we close this session, I want to thank Tim for coming and sharing his story with us, or a partial story. Again, we're going to hear more from him, I believe. I would like for you to take a time to pray for him. As soon as this interview is over, pray that God would continue to bless him, use him in this adventure, this new adventure of being a worship leader in this church, as well as what God has in store for him. Tim, you need your prayers and you need to practice, folks. So pray that God would bless him. Tim, thank you for coming to Morning Moments and being with us.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for joining us for Morning Moments, and stay tuned for maybe another interview with Tim in the future, or other guests that I may have. And keep coming back, and may God richly bless you. Thank you.